Ooh, you know something's up when I'm at a very slightly different angle to usual. I'm just gonna be upfront with you here, and sorry to disappoint, but this video is barely about crafts. As you may know, we just got back from our very first ever cruise holiday, and honestly, I can't force myself to be excited to talk about anything else. So, I will make a deal with you, okay? This week is going to be Cruise Week, and I actually have two videos for you, so the second one will be out on Friday or possibly Saturday, we'll see. But next week we will get back to normal and I'll have a cross-stitch video for you as a reward. P.S. if you do watch this one all the way through, there's a surprise bonus hidden for you as well. We were sailing for a week with Royal Caribbean on one of their tours of the Greek islands. Very exciting, I'd never been to Greece before, and honestly I probably never would have chosen that myself because I don't do at all well with heat. However, this holiday was paid for all 9 of us by Dave's extremely generous dad. So, if you were wondering how some chump like me gets to go on a fancy cruise, sheer luck in choice of life partner and successful glomming on for their family holiday. Sadly, our travel agent was kind of incompetent and really mucked up the travel logistics. Now, the upside of this was that we travelled unnecessarily far to the airport, so I was able to stuff myself with motion sickness pills and get some decent knitting done on the car ride down. I'd cast on some new socks especially for the occasion in this excellently vibrant sock yarn that was hand-dyed for me a while back as part of a gift exchange. The pattern I chose is actually a free one. It's called Double Eyelet Rib Toe Up Socks by Wendy D. Johnson, and I've made this one before, so I already know I like it. I wasn't quite sure how this was going to work with the crazy yarn, but honestly, finding out is kind of half of the fun of knitting socks. So anyway, we strung together a plan of expensive taxis, last-minute tickets for one of the most crowded trains I've ever been on in my life, a shuttle bus to the port that we'd been told didn't exist, and finally we made it to the boat. Almost exactly 2 days after leaving home. Cruise logistics for 9 people are no joke. That first afternoon and evening was basically ship exploration time, and I was like a small child, giddy with excitement at all of the new things. Royal Caribbean do attempt to ruin this for you by having someone stop you at every floor to try and upsell some overpriced package or other, but it's an American line, so that's kind of to be expected, and it wasn't even the worst of it. Best not to get me started on that though. By the end of that day, the two of us mostly knew our way around, whereas the rest of Dave's family spent that day and also most of every other day sitting by the pool sunbathing, and I think they were probably still getting a bit lost in the indoor parts right up until the end of the cruise. Our first full day was originally supposed to be a sea day, but the plan changed and we ended up cruising the Bay of Kotor in Montenegro instead, which I am super glad about because I think it's honestly one of the most beautiful places I have ever seen in real life. It took a good couple of hours to sail in, and then we had to wait ages for the little tender boat to actually take us to the shore, but to be honest, it was so gorgeous, I didn't want to miss anything and I just spent half of the day staring at mountains. No crafting whatsoever, but also no regrets. I would totally go back here on holiday. The next day was Corfu, and his family went off to bake themselves some more on a beach, which sounds like our idea of hell. So we stayed on the ship while it was lovely and quiet. We had a 15-person jacuzzi all to ourselves, we drank sangria early in the morning, and generally just hung out in the adults-only pool bit, which was nice and sheltered. I got some decent sock knitting time in, and I managed to finish the foot section and just about start on the increases for the gusset, so job well done there, I think. Apparently Corfu was lovely, but I'm really glad we had one of these relaxing ship days. It was just so nice. I think I did get about 10 minutes knitting time in a bar that night, but got almost immediately distracted by cocktails, and honestly, what are you gonna do? Next up, we found ourselves in Athens, and we had a coach trip booked from the port into the middle of Athens itself. In hindsight, probably not necessary, and I'm sure we got fleeced, but to be fair, as first-time cruisers, it was very nice being on the official excursions and knowing you were kind of being kept safe, you know? We'd probably be more independently adventurous if there's a next time. We had about 4.5 hours in Athens, I think, and we managed a long, relaxed meal down a picturesque alley that inexplicably nobody thought to take a photo of. Then it was a fairly arduous climb up to see the Acropolis, which had been closed a couple of weeks before due to the heat, but thankfully it was open again for us. We got a security whistle blown at us because Dave's sister-in-law is a menace, but at least none of us fell over on the extremely slippery marble steps on the way up. Seriously, they tell you online to wear shoes with good grips, but wear shoes with good grips. We didn't have a whole lot of time for anything else, so most of us settled down for a nice shady drink, and I bought a souvenir dress, and that was kind of that for Athens. The two of us did get to an impressive dance show in the ship's theatre. We'd been told to get there nice and early because they fill up, which, yeah, that didn't end up being the case at all. But I was going nowhere without my backpack of emergency entertainment, so when we found ourselves sitting waiting in there, I got some of those gusset increases done. Gotta take your opportunities where you find them. Mykonos was definitely and surprisingly our worst port. It was extremely windy that day, and there was a bit of a rush on in terms of cruise ships. Our captain, Captain Frank, raced overnight to get there early and bagsy the dock so that all the other ships had to use the small tendering boats like we did in Kotor. But it meant that in total there were apparently 14,000 cruise visitors in and around Mykonos Old Town that day, which, as you can imagine, was a bit hectic. We couldn't even find a place to get a cool drink because they were so expensive they even made the ones on board the ship look like a good deal. The only beach we found was declared grim, so we collectively noped out pretty quick, and honestly we were back on the ship in time for a nice free buffet lunch. Shout out to the Windjammer buffet, by the way. It was incredible every single day, and we basically ate our body weight there for every meal. We nicked off into the adults only bit again, where I finally managed to break out some cross stitch for the first time all week. I'd packed the Ocean Wonder kit that I got from Caterpillar Cross Stitch a couple months ago because, you know, cruise, sea creatures, it just made sense. This was my starting point, and I'll be honest, this was kind of the only time I got anything done on it at all whatsoever all week. So this was my end point. Such progress, much turtle. Good views though. We'd skipped the ice skating show earlier in the week, and tonight was our last chance, so again we got there early, which this time was definitely needed, and of course it got me a bit of extra knitting time. Always a bonus. And speaking of bonuses, smooth. You might know that I recently introduced monthly memberships over on Ko-fi, and as part of that announcement I also floated the idea of maybe setting up a Discord server. Long story short, the vote was overwhelmingly yes please, so I've done that now. I invited my Ko-fi members to join and help me test it a few days ago, and everything seems to be working properly, so since you've willingly sat through basically just me showing you my holiday photos, I think it's time to let you in too. You'll find the invite link in the video description below. Discord will work through mobile app, desktop app, or just through your web browser, so don't worry if you've never used it before. Whatever device you're on, it should work. Feel free to join us and chat about crafts. Okay, back to cruising. Our last port was Argostoli on the island of Kefalonia, and this was the second one we'd actually booked a proper excursion for. It was a long coach trip around a lot of the island where we got to see things very briefly that were totally worth it. Check out this lake. It was amazing. It's underground, but the cave roof collapsed centuries ago, so you see the sun shafts coming down and the water is this stunning turquoise. They take you around on a little boat and you can spot eels and fish and bats, and I just cannot believe I got to see something like this for real. It's like something out of an old school travel brochure. We also visited another cave full of stalactites and stalagmites, and you can't really get an idea of scale from the close-up photos, but this will probably help. The cave is around 200 feet underground, and you had to climb down a lot of very steep steps. On the way back up, a stranger asked if I was okay because I was so out of breath. Meanwhile, of course, Dev's 70-odd-year-old dad is scampering up them like it's no problem at all. Yeah, I maybe need to exercise a bit more. Anyway, it was a lot of coach travel on this day, and again you might think, perfect knitting opportunity. But I was very happy just to sit and enjoy the view, and I am not even sorry. Kefalonia was definitely the place we all unanimously declared we would be happy to come for a full holiday. It is gorgeous, and I can confirm that the sea is lovely to plunge in as well, especially when your feet are swollen from the heat and all of the salty food you insist on eating. The final day of our voyage was a sea day, and predictably about 90% of people on board tried to spend it on the pool deck, which we're informed did result in some spicy drama around the sun lounges and attempted reservations thereof. That is a whole different world. We were happy just chilling on the lower decks where you could sit outside without getting sunburned, and I assume I did some knitting, but somehow the only footage I have of this entire day is where I think I'm trying to demonstrate the fun vibration of our cabin. I don't know. We checked some stuff off our ship bucket list that we'd just not had time for on other days. and honestly had an early night. I haven't mentioned this so far, but believe it or not, myself and Dave were the party animals of the group, staying up past 11 PM almost every night, and doing such fun things as discos, and silent discos, and casinos, and more silent discos. But we had a long day of travel coming up, so on that last night we were happy just to crawl into bed. The trip home was kind of horrendous in every single way, but I was once again dosed up to the eyeballs with motion sickness pills, so I was able to knit in the car. It also meant I was feeling slightly out of it, and so that's what I blame for having to turn my heel not once, not twice, in fact I think a total of 5 times before I finally did it right and stopped having to rip it back out. Whatever, it kept me occupied. So yes, if you are thinking of trying a cruise and you think it's going to be this amazingly slow-paced, relaxing time with lots of opportunity for crafts, well, I mean, it probably could be if you're not the type to suffer from FOMO. But the thing with a line like Royal Caribbean is that there's always something going on, and I really didn't want to miss any of the weird opportunities on the ship. As a result, I just didn't get very far with any of the self-entertainment options I'd brought. I mean, it took me a whole week to get through the Council of Elrond. That is not like me. Other cruise lines, I'm sure, are much more grown up and relaxed, and maybe one day I'll get to try one. I hear Fred Olsen cruises even have an arts and crafts room. But for now it is back home, back into my crafting nest, and the continuing effort to snap me out of this post-holiday funk. I'm sure I'll be over it and back to my perky self by next week. This video that all of about 3 of you probably watched was brought to you in part by my wonderful enablers over on Ko-fi, and especially by the members of the Stitch Squad, who this week are Stitching Liz, Marianne Johnson, Sunny, Laura Selletts, Candy Riley Pettinger, and our newest member, Rosalie. Thank you, as always, I appreciate it so much, seriously. Okay, I hope someone out there enjoyed hearing about our holiday despite the lack of dramatic crafting progress. Do watch out for the second cruise week video, which I am super excited about. But in the meantime, have a brilliant rest of your day and keep making cool stuff.